Okay, started off 500 points, Orcs. Here we go. We got 24 biggins, full command with sword and board. Next to them we have an Orc Big Boss with regular kit and a charm shield. Behind him is a level 1 Orc Shaman. And next to them we have one Vanilla Troll, 35 points, cheap and easy. And to the right of that we have an Orc Boar Chariot. On the Skaven side, we have 30 slaves, Paw Leader Musician, 30 slaves, Paw Leader Musician, right next to that. And then we have 2 units of giant rats called Rat Darts. They have 5 giant rats and a Packmaster. And then we have a level 1 Warblock Engineer. He also has a Doom Rocket. Then we have 20 Clan Rats with Musician Standard. And right next to them, 18 Plague Monks, Musician Standard. And there's a good look at the Skaven army. In spell selection, we roll for Bonehead, the level 1. And he is going to be picking on the lore of the Big Wah. We roll a 5, which is Here We Go. Probably not useful in this battle, so swap it out for the signature spell, Gaze of Mork. And the wrong card's there, but it's Gaze of Mork. That's the Orc and Goblin shooting. We roll for the Spells of Ruin on Skaven. He rolls a 4, which is going to be... So he decides to keep that spell, as it's going to boost all... Here's a good look at the battlefield. We have some interesting terrain, and here we go, rolling for sides, and Orc wins the pick of... And the Orcs get their pick. Now for first drop, you see the Skaven player wins, but he has way more units, so he's just going to go ahead and put his down first anyway. And we start off, we have one big ol' unit of Skaven slaves, right out in front and right in the middle, as per usual, the Skaven army. I counter this by putting my biggin unit, who are unafraid of anything in this low point game, right up on the hill with commanding position. He counters that by putting his Skaven slaves just inside a nice little arc of leadership on the side. This will be actually a little detrimental to him later, because his position is off because that idol. I counter that by putting my troll right there next to where the general's going to go, so a nice leadership bubble. And he puts his nice little unit of clan rats, that's his bunker, right in the back line. And after a little debate, I put my chariot over on the right side to be a commanding flank position. And he counters this by putting out his little chaff units of rat darts, trying to stay in bubble. They have movement 6, so they're pretty quick. And then I drop my characters, of course, general in the bunker, and I put the shaman right off to the side. And he puts his last dart, and then puts his general, which is his engineer, right in that bunker of clan rats, so he won't be able to be touched for a while. And we're all set up, ready to go. Orcs end up winning the roll to go first with the +1, but we didn't get to show that. And at the first one, not much deliberation. It's going to be pretty quick and simple. Testing for my animosity there with the biggins, and they pass. And now I have to test for stupidity. Leadership 8, and easily get it. So, no compulsory BS this round. Chariot advances, just to get a nice little threat in the flank position. And unafraid, the boys just charge forward, marching 8. Now this I'm testing to see how far I am away with the troll. It's always nice to be able to test everything in 8th edition. And I put again 17 inches just to make those Plague Monks test. And the Shaman advances just to be able to put a threat on Skaven turn 1, hopefully. Okay, now we're rolling for Winds of Magic. A whopping 2. So I try to get the Gaze of Mork spell off. Maybe I can get the distance. It's a boosted version, but the roll of 6 doesn't happen. Now we're going to Skaven turn 1. First of all, he has to test compulsory charge with the Frenzied Plague Monks, because I put that troll within 17, and they easily pass and advance up to threaten. Now he moves up the Skaven. Full attempts for me to charge through his lines. He advances the rat dart forward just to be annoying. These things are really annoying when they get right up in your face, and he does that with both of them. Now, finding that the Skaven slaves are a little out of position, he shuffles over to the right in the sidestep shuffle at half movement. So Yeah, that'll help later. But he shuffles his bunker unit forward to get in position and rolls for Winds of Magic, getting 6. With only 3 dispel dice in the enemy. Doubles are good in the new edition. And he's going to cast Death Frenzy on that Skaven slave unit, and it goes off. Really high value, really hard. I need double 6s, but well, let's see what we can do during turn 2. And off we go. The Animosity test turns out just fine again. Stupidity, not so much. And he shambles forward an inch. Stupid troll. And the boys advance again, unafraid. Check line of sight and a little bit of distance just to see if they're going to get flanked. But I feel like it's fine. The Boar Chariot moves up for the nice flanking position. And now we go ahead and move the Shaman over out of harm's way. That way hopefully he can get a little pot shot off, because that's what he's here for in the army. Winds of Magic, an impressive 11. And that just means 6 dice at the boosted version, and it's irresistible. Goes in 8d6 range, and ends up being able to clip through the Plague Monks. And I know they're nasty, so I want to get them out of the way quick. And 3 swings, and only ends up killing 1. And the miscast gives me a 9, which does a strength 6 hit to my Shaman, and consequently wounds him. And that's what the battlefield looks like at the end of the turn. So we're going to be moving on to Skaven turn 2. Let's see how they counter my unimpressive display. Here the Skaven are getting ready to move about. So we have compulsory charge, and the Plague Monks must charge because they failed their leadership, and the Skaven Slave decide we want to get in there too, so both units charge. Now, for multiple charges of a single enemy in the new edition, you roll for each, but then move them at the same time, so you can't really bugger up your movement if they're both legal. And they both end up making it in there. That troll is in trouble. Now, for the remaining part of his moves, he has to test a march with that front rat dart, but Skaven leadership fails him miserably, so he ends up only being able to do a regular move. Still 6 inches, so not too terrible, but yeah, you just advance as much as possible to get in the way, because that's what they do best. And the other dart moves in behind as kind of a combo domino effect, trying to direct me away from his main combat. And the other Skaven Slaves sidestep shuffle, as does his Clan Rat unit. He wants to get good line of sight, start blasting stuff away with his mage. And for magic, he rolls another 6, seems to be the theme. And he ends up trying to throw 4 dice at Warp Lightning, and the total on the dice is not that great. And I roll all 3 of mine and end up dispelling it. And in close combat, this is the beating on the troll, and the troll ends up taking only 1 wound, so not too bad. And the troll swings back, does a couple of hits, and ends up taking out a couple of slaves, but it's not looking well for the overwhelming stacked odds against him. With 3 ranks and 2 banners in the charge, he has to roll Snake Eyes, which he does not. And both units pursue. The Plague Monks had to pursue because of their frenzy, but the Skaven Slaves decide it's also a good idea. And they run down the troll, but the Skaven Slaves, because of the line of direction, actually clip the biggins, which will make that combat happen next turn. And it's a little out-of-turn Death Frenzy deaths, because you take wounds each turn from the Death Frenzy. Orcs and Goblins turn. Pretty easy. Gonna charge in with the Chariot, and I make it. And so they slide over to accommodate. And then it's just remaining moves. The Shaman, he's moving over to get a nice little line of sight on the side of those Plague Monks. And for Winds of Magic, only get 3 dice, but throw all 3 of them at the regular version of Gaze of Mork, because it doesn't need that much distance, and his attempt to dispel is a fail. So this is the distance, ends up being 9 inches, which is just good enough to hit all of the Plague Monks in the 1 row. And since the Strength 5 is a lower attribute, I end up killing 5, which is awesome, because these things can hurt if they get into combat. And now impact hits. I get 3, and end up killing 2 slaves on the impact. Now he challenges with his paw leader, and I accept with my champ. and he's hoping to kill him, and they get a ton of attacks, but he ends up hitting with 3, but wounding with none, and my champ whips in return. Now we have the regular Skaven slaves, higher initiative. They throw out a ton of attacks because of the death frenzy that's on them, and hit with a whole bunch, and end up wounding with none. So the big boss swings back, and needs 3s to hit, and hits with 1, and strength 5 first turn needs a 2. And now I'm stacking all the attacks together with the regular boys and the chariot, because they'll all be striking strength 5, and we'll be hitting on 3s. And you can see here I get a decent amount of attacks, hit with a bunch, and I need 2s to wound, and end up killing, I think, with 7 there. So that's a rank and a couple, which is enough to deny his steadfast for ranks, and consequently he pops, and Skaven slaves do D3 plus 1 per rank, strength 3 hits on a radius. He gets a 4-inch, so he's hitting a bunch of things. So first the rat dart takes a few hits and ends up killing the rat dart. Now he gets 4 hits on the chariot, but thankfully toughness 5 saves the day, and he only gets a couple hits on the boys and gets a wound, but I save it. And now that dart is gone. Because of that chariot charge, it can overrun, which I decide is a good idea. And I missed the first rat dart, but I end up overrunning, into the other rat dart. So that's going to be a little bit of a meanness. Now we keep our 1-inch because that's important for the next phase. So slide over just to make everything accommodate, and you only have to corner to corner. So that right there is the legal formation for that charge. And let's see what the Skavens can do in retaliation. He wisely decides to make his death-frenzied Skaven slave unit charge into the boar chariot, hoping to get that thing out of the way, and he makes the charge successfully. The other rat dart tries to march because he can wheel around with a 12-inch move, but fails, so he just reforms. And the frenzied plague monks also try to march, but don't pass their leadership. Now Squeaks hops out of his unit and gets ready for some magic, and he tries to get another death frenzy off with the units in combat, but it is successfully dispelled. Now time in the Skaven shooting, we have a doom rocket shot at the boys. Uses 4 dice. It's up giving about 20-some inches, and puts that big blast marker right on the backside, so that's going to hit a bunch of them. I think it ends up hitting 13 or so boys. And the rolls at strength 5, so he only needs 3s to wound, and he gets a good number of them, and I get no saves, so that is 7 dead boys. Their panic check, first one fail, but I have the magic standard that allows them 1 reroll per game, and I pass. And now we're taking some extra casualties because of Death Frenzy we forgot, but we're doing the impact hits, and 2 of them hit the Packmaster, and he dies. And 4 of them hit the rats and take out 4, and his 1 rat fails. Actually ends up doing a wound to the chariot, so that's a pretty tough rat there. And now his death frenzied Skaven slaves swinging as hard as they can, and end up whiffing pretty hard. And the chariot has attacks from the boys and the boars, which will attack the Skaven slaves, and end up killing 3 of them in retaliation. Now his giant rats have to test, and they fail. But the stubborn leadership of the Skaven slaves, 8 with the general, passes. So the giant rat takes off, but the boar chariot is stuck in combat with the Skaven slaves. Now let's see how the orcs retaliate to this in their turn 4. First of all, test for animosity, which I pass, and I'm going to go ahead and throw those biggins right into combat, because that's where they love to be. So hopefully that'll help out in the middle. And with a nice roll of 5 plus their 4-inch movement, they make it in there. And now combat must shuffle to accommodate, because I can't move over. His unit shuffles to maximize models. Test to march with the shaman, and I pass, and I'm going to get right in the flank of those plague monks, hopefully do a repeat of last turn. And with 6 dice, I'm going to go ahead and try it. No irresistible, but that's a pretty high number. And he does not dispel it, and that's the range. And again, it plows through the front rank, hitting 5, and ends up killing 3. So, now for the close combat. We have another challenge issued by the paw leader, My champ accepts, and Paw Leader does nothing, and my champ comes back and clobbers the Paw Leader in return, doing 2 wounds, so that's 1 kill and a point of overkill. Now he has his Skaven slaves swinging back without Death Frenzy. They hit like paper. But he ends up doing quite a few hits and totals out to do 2 wounds. So I have to make my 5+ and 6+ parry, which I make none of. So that's 2 boys dead. I swing with the chariot and hit with a few. And the 2 wounds, wounded on 4s, got nothing. Now the big boss. He ends up hitting with 2, and he has to wound on 2+, and of course I only get 1. Now the boys swinging, they're going to be hitting on 3s and wounding on 2s. So that's a couple of more dead Skaven slaves. Still as stubborn, but he passes on a 3. Next turn, it's going to be all or nothing gambit this turn with the Skaven. So we got his shaman charging mine, and I decide to flee to hopefully get out of range. And the Plague Monks are going to charge the rear of the big uns, and the Dart is going to charge the chariot. Now, his shaman fails, and the reason I did that is so he won't be able to cast Death Frenzy on that Skaven slave unit. And now the Plague Monks charge the rear, and the Dart charges the side. And now the remaining trying to rally that little rat, and it does not. And so running, the clan rats end up being fine. So now he gets to make his initiative 4 attacks. Rat Dart first, and ends up not doing anything. At toughness 5 is saving that chariot. And the Skaven slaves in front, initiative 4, and a save 2. And now the big boss, initiative 3, gets to swing and kills a couple more slaves, and his initiative 3 Plague Monks get a ton of swings, but don't end up doing that many wounds. Just 2 of them. And I get to swing back, now that they're done swinging, and kill a couple of Plague Monks in return, because I get a bunch of swings on the rear, and do a bunch of swings to the front, champ included, because he's no longer in a challenge, and kill 5 of the Skaven slaves. Now, because I got ranks, he ends up having a test on Snake Eyes, so the Plague Monks fail, the Giant Rats fail, and Snake Eyes for the Skaven slaves pass, so yet again stuck in combat. So the Plague Monks run away, and the Giant Rats also run away. Now let's see what the Orcs can do in retaliation the next turn. They won a pretty decisive victory, but those Skaven slaves are still there. So starting off, test a rally with the Shaman. These turns are becoming real quick because of the low point game. Well, let's see what he can do. He gets just a few dice, try to cast Gaze of Mork, do some damage, and rolls pretty low. 4 1s in that roll, and is easily dispelled by the Engineer. And back to combat. Skaven slaves, see what they can do against the biggins, and roll pretty poorly, and I make a save. Now we have the big boss swinging, killing a couple, and then the unit, or this is the chariot, does nothing, but then the unit swings back. They're still strength 4, so they hit hard and clobber 4 more slaves. They are no longer steadfast, so let's see if they break. If they do, on a 7, the radius of their blowing up is 3 inches, which is consequently enough to hit their shaman, or their engineer, and he dies. So this is the rolling to wound on my 2 units, and does little to nothing, but it does end up killing 1 biggin, and there goes that threat to the battle. So Skaven retaliation. What to do? They charge the chariot, hopefully getting some easy VP there. And I choose flee, because I don't want to lose these points. And I go really, really far. So it's more than likely going to be a failed charge. And yes, he rolls it. Unless he got double 6s, he might have made it, but they fail. Now attempts to rally, so They fail with the rat darts and fail with the plague monks. And now, Orc's turn. Let's see how we can counter that little last bit of resistance we have on the battlefield here. And so what the boys do is decide to charge. But first they pass their animosity, so all is well. And the Skaven decide to flee, because they don't want that last unit to be killed. Discretion, apparently, is the better part of valor. And now, 12 inches away, so the boys only need to roll an 8+, and they don't make it, so they shuffle 5 inches forward, out of reach of the clan rats. And the chariot decides it's better to turn around and rally, and faces that last rat dart, trying to get some points. And that is all there is for that part of the phase. And the shaman moves up and decides to sling a spell at the clan rats and gets off with a decent amount, but he doesn't want to miscast, so only uses 4, but with 6 dice it's easily, and that quickly wraps up the Orcs' turn 6. So now the Skaven will have a chance to try to salvage some points. I can't really do any damage this turn, but let's see what points they manage to salvage. Leadership 9 of the clan rats allows them to rally, so that's will be a little bit of a point denial there. And he tries to rally his other 2 units, the dart needing a 5 and fails and continues on, and then Snake Eyes needed for the plague monks. Oh, so close. So ends up being an orc victory by a decent amount and good game handshake.